Hello students and welcome back. Today we're going to be solving equations, but now we're going to be focusing on two-step equations. Don't forget as you go to take notes, and after you watch the video you go back to the website and you complete the check that is required of you. So let's get started. Now, we have learned a very important rule in our last video, and that's if we have ourselves an equal sign, if we were to split it into two sides, the left side and the right side, the key thing to remember is any operation that's done to the left-hand side has to be done to the right-hand side, and vice versa. If you do something on the right, it has to be done on the left. We need to maintain that balanced equation. So let's think back to order of operations that we just learned a couple days ago. Our order is that we start with parentheses, then we work with our exponents, then we do our multiplying and dividing at the same time, followed by adding and subtracting at the same time. Well, when we solve an equation, everything is the opposite, just like we talked about in our one-step equation. So typically, when we have two steps, we're going to have to do a couple of operations to undo each other. So we usually start with doing our adding and subtracting first, followed by any multiplying and dividing. Then we deal with any exponents if there are any, and then our parentheses. And just keep in mind we might need to do more adding and subtracting once we hit the parentheses portion. So here are a couple of helpful hints for you. First and foremost, when you start a problem, identify what operations are on the side of the variable. So do we have multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting? And then from there, we're going to think, what do I need to do to undo that operation? We're always going to be using the opposite. And then again, the thing to remember is what you do on one side of an equal sign, you have to do it to the other side. We need to keep ourselves a balanced equation. So let's take a look at some examples. I'm going to show you three different kinds today. So here's our first one. We have 4x minus 5 is equal to 11. And now let's identify what we have. Well, between the 4 and x we have multiplication, and then this is a subtraction problem. So the opposite to solve this would be to do addition and division. Now when we do this, remember, think opposite of order of operations. So when I decide, am I going to be doing my addition or my division first, I'm going to do the addition first because normally that's what's done last. Everything is opposite. So just like before, I'm going to draw a line down the middle, and then I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So that minus 5 and that plus 5 gives us 0, so it essentially cancels out. When we're left with now on the left-hand side is just the 4x. Because remember, minus 5 and plus 5 is 0. We don't need to write down the 0. So we're left with 4x. On the right-hand side, 11 plus 5 is 16. Well, we're not done yet because x is not alone. We still have 4 times x. The opposite of multiplying is to divide. So just like with our one-step equations now, we're going to draw a fraction bar underneath to divide both sides by 4. The 4's on the left will cancel because they give you the answer of 1, and we do not need to write down the number 1. So all we're left with is x. 16 divided by 4 is 4. Now this problem is done because x is by itself and is only on one side of the equal sign. So x is equal to 4. Our second type is this one here where we have x over 3 or x divided by 3 plus 4. So in this one we have a division problem and we have an addition. So in order to undo everything, we're going to need to use subtraction and multiplication. And just like we discussed, we're going to essentially do the opposite of order of operations. So that means I'm going to deal with the plus 4 first. The opposite of adding 4 is to subtract 4. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides and it cancels on the left. And what I'm left with is x over 3 and 9 minus 4 is 5. Now we're back to our one-step equation. Remember, this represents a division problem. The opposite of dividing is multiplying. So to get rid of the 3 on the bottom, we're going to multiply both sides by 3. And that 3 divided by 3 on the left-hand side is 1. We do not need to write the number 1, so we just have x. And then 5 times 3 is 15. I'm going to show you one more problem, which looks like this. Okay, so to identify what we have here, we have ourselves x plus 3, and we also have divided by 6. So now this one is using addition and division, so we're going to have to use multiplying and we're going to have to use subtraction. Now keep in mind here is that there's a complete difference between this one and the last one based upon what the fraction looks like. So what we're going to do is going to get rid of the 6 first because this plus 3 is essentially trapped by our fraction bar. So we can't just do minus 3 from both sides because I cannot get it out from where the fraction bar is. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to do a times 6 on both sides, because remember, this represents division. So by doing times 6, these 6's here are going to cancel out, and we get ourselves a 1, and all we're left with now is x plus 3, while on the right hand side we have 2 times 6, which is 12. And now our final step here is like the one-step equations before. We have a plus 3, so we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. That plus 3 and minus 3 cancel out because you get 0. We don't need to write 0. 12 minus 3 is 9. So our answer here is 9. What I really wanted to make sure is that you notice the difference between these two equations. In this one here, we only have our little fraction, and it's just x is being divided by 3. While in this one over here, we have a big fraction. Our whole x plus 3 is being divided by 6. You can really relate this one here to this one here. They are done in similar ways. You do your addition and your subtraction first, while the one on the right hand side here, you're going to do your multiplication first. Then you're going to do your adding and subtracting. So it's very important that you keep that in mind when you're solving these problems. As before, if you have any questions, please write them down and bring them into class tomorrow, and make sure you do the completion form. I'll see you in class tomorrow.